everyone, it's Monday and it's 12 noon here in Sydney, and whatever that is wherever you are in the world. It's 2 p.m. in New Zealand, it's 11 a.m. in Queensland, it's 3 hours, so it's 9 a.m. in Western Australia if you're tuning in from there. I know I have a few people perhaps tuning in from South Australia. I just think we're half an hour's time difference. And it's Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening in the US. So I'm just here to tell everybody that's still in Sunday that Monday is here and it's magnificent. In fact, we had the most magnificent weekend. Louisa, hello Louisa, lovely to see you here. So good to see you. If you have any questions, Louisa, type them in. It will be so good. I'm doing Q&A today, so I already have a couple of really good questions, and I had a few in my data bank. Hi Laura, great to see you. I'm here to answer your question today. So I just wanted to, Laura asked a really good question. I'm just going to read that because it's right over here. Happy New Year. Thanks, Laura. Happy New Year to you too. A question on what does a healthy profit look like? A healthy profit margin percentage look like? Obviously, it varies across different industries, but what would you say as a low, average, high across the board with the clients you have advised? I'm currently working out all my costs and pricing plan and determining the profit. Just want to know where my benchmark is. My industry is mostly books and education sector. So I wasn't quite sure when you said books and education sector, Laura, whether you meant that you're publishing books or whether you're a bookseller selling books, whether you have a bricks and mortar. Yes, the sound is on. Can you not hear me? Yeah, as far as I know, my sound is on. Yeah, so can I get a thumbs up if you can actually hear me from somebody else as well there? I'm not sure what else I could do. Let me just have a little, yeah, my sound is definitely on. So yeah, got it, beautiful. Okay, so back to Laura's question about profitability. Let me start. Firstly, is the way we determine profit is that in fact, if we use the profit first methodology, which you sell book subscriptions, I don't publish. Terrific. Okay, so you're selling subscriptions. So then again, it would be, so you're buying the book from somebody at a price and you're on selling to someone else. So let's just step right back. So the first thing we absolutely need to understand in business is how much does it cost us to run our business? So it's super important to understand our total expenses. And this was one of the things that I was talking in the webinar that I ran last Wednesday. And I'll be running another one in a couple of weeks' time. I'll be putting the links, no bricks and mortar, just online, beautiful. So one of the things that we do in determining profit is to find out how much our business costs to run. So I have very few expenses, but once you start to add them up, is that, you know, the expenses start to truly add up. And what's the best method to collect payment when working internationally? Stripe or, oh, that's a different question from Louisa. Beautiful. I'll come back to that one in a second. So let's go back to the expenses. So super important to understand how much your whole business costs. And it's phenomenal how many other costs there are. So, you know, some of the things that, you know, when I add up my costs, you have insurance and you have the cost of maintaining your website, and you know, even just my Xero subscription has gone from $50 to $55 a month, and so that extra $5 a month is $60 across the year. So that's another $60 in revenue that needs to be factored into my equation somehow. So one of the things, to go back to your question, Laura, is one of the underpinning principles of the profit first methodology is that you take out your profit first. So you decide what you want that to be. So sometimes when people set up their business, they're not making a lot of profit, so they start with 1%. And every bit of revenue that comes in, we start to take 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%. And different industries will allow you to have a different amount of profit, as you said in your question, Laura. So the first step for you is to absolutely understand how much it costs you to run your business. And you have what's called fixed expenses. So there's the ones that stay the same even when you sell no books. So if you sell one book, they're going to cost that. And if you sell 100 books, it's going to cost that. And then the second part of your equation is then the variable costs that go with the books. So if you buy this book for $10 and you sell it for $15, then that's $5 contribution margin on each of those books. Now you might actually have a book that you can buy for 10 and sell for 15. You might have a book that you can buy for 20 and sell for 30. So each of your different products is going to have a different amount of what's called contribution margin. So in order to be able to calculate that, so you first want your fixed expenses and then you have those variable expenses. So I hope that's helping to make some sense. And then what is the pricing that you're going to be able to have for those subscriptions? So if you have $10,000 worth of fixed expenses, how many subscriptions do you actually need just to cover the fixed expenses? And you know, I've written an article in my blog post and I can happily post it in here afterwards. It's how many cupcakes does it take to pay the rent? And so when we're looking at bricks and mortar, you know, what do we have to sell? And the same applies to us. So what are those basic costs that we have? So to pay ourselves, to pay all the costs that it takes to run the business, how many subscriptions would we actually need to do that? So I hope that's helpful, Laura. Super happy to, I'll send you the link. I'll put the link into this for the webinar that I'm running in 2 weeks, and we'll definitely we'll talk about that. So you might decide you want to make 10% profit altogether. So you do the maths and you work backwards. You figure out how much the expenses are, what does the revenue need to be to allow you to make 10% or 15% or 20%. Now, one of the things that I do know, because in fact this beautiful home that I am in, I'm in this art house again. One of the people that owns this house actually owns a bookshop as well. So, you know, over the years I've become quite friendly with them. And one of the things he was talking about the other day, so Laura, this could be helpful to you if you're taking books on and then selling them, is that a lot of the book publishing companies actually have a very generous offer where they take back books that bookshops don't sell. So if you're a bookshop, and I know you're not, but if you were a bookshop, you would buy the books and then there's a certain amount of time that the publisher allows before the books can be returned at the cost that they were. So, but that's one of the things that the owner needs to be hyper vigilant about, is making sure that if this particular book has to be returned by the 10th of January, then it's super important to have that in the calendar, to have that in your workouts so that the books can be returned and you get the credit. So I'm not sure if that's something that's helpful to you, but it certainly was an interesting thing for me to understand about how that part of a business works. Okay, now to go to Louisa's question about overseas. Thanks, Laura. Great explanation. Oh, I appreciate that. So certainly message me if you want some more clarity, or if you get some of the calculations part of the way, if you then want to have a look at them. But you know, ultimately the profit that you make is completely determined by you, truly. So let's go back to international payments, and maybe that's something that would interest you as well, Laura. So international payments can be via Stripe or PayPal, Square. There's Stripe and PayPal on yours. You're using both. I use a mixture as well. I have some people who pay directly into my bank account. So one of the things I would alert you to when you're using Stripe and PayPal, and you know, it came to my attention last year, is that when you set up a payment in Stripe, in PayPal, just whether you're doing it or your bookkeeper or your accountant or somebody is doing that for you, have the invoice tax office compliant. There are certain things that an invoice needs to have on it, and make sure that the way you set up your Stripe is that when it takes the payment from the person, that it is actually sending them a tax compliant invoice, because there are rules about what information needs to be on that invoice in order for it to be tax compliant for the customer. So depending on how much it is, how much information needs to be on. So in Australia, one of the rules is that it must say your business name, and it must have your ABN or your ACN, your company number or your Australian business number. If you're interacting with an overseas, you need to get the GST right. You know, will you be charging GST? Do you charge GST now? Is it applicable to in the customers that you have overseas? Would you need to pay tax in their country if you're doing international transactions? What would be the obligation to be involved in tax for either, and if you think about America, you've got tax in the state, you've got tax in the country. So just being really clear that you are meeting those obligations overseas, but making sure that your invoice has all the information on it, that it says this is how much. So if you're having Australian customers and you're using Stripe or PayPal, that the invoice issued by the payment system has the amount and the GST amount separated, what the transaction is for, what the payment is for. Is it for a book, or is it for a session, or for a coaching session? And then just making sure that you're absolutely compliant that way. The thing to take into account is that Stripe and PayPal charge a fee. So earlier when we were answering Laura's question about profitability, super important to add on how much those fees are going to be, because some of them are quite substantial. You know, I think both Stripe and PayPal have a sort of like a minimum fee and then have a percentage fee on top. So just having a look at those. Yeah, so Laura, you're 1.75 plus 30 cents, 2.6 plus 30 cents for PayPal. Yeah, and that's for domestic. And then, and that's why it's also really important when you're looking at your expenses. And I know this isn't the question that's been asked, but the international transaction fees can be quite horrendous. Over the last couple of years, I've transferred everything from my various Amex and MasterCards to a fee-free MasterCard that I have. So I don't get charged the international transaction fee. And maybe my exchange rate's a little bit different, but for the amount of the transactions that I'm doing, it doesn't, you know, like that for me works not to have to pay, you know, $4 or $5 on a transaction. Louisa's saying thank you, that's super helpful. Okay, so that was 2 fantastic questions. Does anybody else listening in have a question? I had another one from Mark. Mark asked, did I have method or process that I use? Let me just get that question. Can I ask in advance, is there a process or method you use? Laura and Mark, thank you. Great insight. Lovely. Thank you. Yes, thanks everybody for contributing to everybody else's answers there. That's so good. And, you know, I'm not the expert on this. I have a lot of knowledge, and I do need to be mindful that this is information, but always check with your financial advisors, your accountants, before you make any major decisions about things. It's always super important to just, you know, make decisions with the facts and with the data and make the comparisons. Okay, a method and a process. Well, when it comes to money, I think money is very important to have a method or a process, really super important. So the sort of processes I use is that when revenue comes into my account, and I recommend to other clients as well, is when revenue comes in, put aside the tax portion. If you're charging GST, get that GST into another account. That's one of my underpinning processes. I think that is absolutely run a business 101. Have a separate account for your tax. If you are making a lot of profit, and Laura, to your question about profit, then have a chat with your accountant that if you're making this much profit, how much should you put away so that you've got money to pay tax afterwards? Or are you going to use that tax to reinvest in that profit to reinvest in your business, to build a better website, to help build your team, to do professional development? So, you know, what is the purpose of that profit? But if you're going to be making a profit and the tax office is going to want their share of it, and we live in a terrific country and paying tax is just part of, you know, what we do, then have a separate account so that you can put that tax away. Oh, I just saw another little comment there. What did Day say there? I use Square as a CBD store. It gets super expensive and everybody wants a cut. Yes, indeed. And I think one of the other things to check with, thank you for that, because Square, I think, is built into your website, isn't it? That's one of the ones that builds into the website. One of the things, and there's a tapping, it makes it really convenient to go to markets. You know, it's really super convenient to have those, but there's a cost involved in having that level of convenience. If it's possible for somebody to pay directly into your account, that's often a quicker way to do it, a cheaper way to do it. One of the things that one of our local stores, it's a social enterprise, told us recently was that when you tap, or if the person inserts the card and puts in their PIN, that the rate sometimes is different depending on the financial institution that you're working with. So that might be something to actually check out. is what difference does it make if you've got customers who tap as opposed to customers who actually put their card in and tap it out. So it's just if you're in a face-to-face situation. So Mark, back to your questions about process and about methodologies. Looking at your numbers on a regular basis is also another part of the methodology that I would highly recommend. Is that once a week? Is it on the 1st, the 10th and the 20th? How often do you look at your expenses, make sure they're up to date, pay your BAS on time, pay your superannuation on time, make sure you're paying yourself on a regular basis, and look at your KPIs. So if you have set yourself that this is how much your expenses are going to be, and that's what you thought the expenses were going to be for this month, and they're more or they're less, it's a good idea to have a regular time to look at those so that you're actually making sure that you've either paid all the bills that were due, because if your expenses are a bit less, maybe something hasn't been paid. If they're a bit more, it could be because something's been paid twice. Maybe somebody's put their prices up and you didn't know. Maybe there's a subscription that's an annual one that suddenly shows up somewhere. So it's super important to keep on top of the actual profit and loss, not just looking at the bank account and seeing how much money's in the bank account. Okay, so there we go. That was 3 really terrific questions. There are many more systems and processes that I use, but having a regular pattern of how to do things. I did have another question about when do I start using software? In terms of, do I use an Excel spreadsheet? Do I buy into Xero or MYOB or QuickBooks or one of the other softwares? And that's really a very personal decision. Absolutely, if you have GST involved, it really does become much easier to have it set up. And if you have multiple transactions, then you're absolutely going to want to make sure you are using a software. And which one would I recommend? The one I would recommend is the one that works best for your business. So if you already are using a booking system for your dental practice or your Pilates studio or your business, then which of the softwares is able to dovetail and work in conjunction with that, particularly if you have a lot of transactions. That's one of the ways to help you make the decision. Again, how much does it cost? I know my Xero subscription started at this much because I had this many transactions, and then when you have more transactions you pay this much, and then you pay this much, and if you want more access, more people to use it, that's when the prices start to change. So again, it's a big decision to make, because making the change would be a little onerous to change from QuickBooks to Xero or Xero to MYOB, to change those around. So can I get a thumbs up to say that this has been helpful today? I know Louisa said that was helpful explanation to her. I know Laura said that she was happy with hers, and I know Mark has said thank you, helpful information. So if there's any other questions, I'm just going to stay online for another minute or two. This is about our 20 minutes. Thank you. Got some love and some thumbs up there. That's so good. Thank you very much. I may still be in this gorgeous house again next Monday. It could well be my new working space on Mondays, because it's just such a great space. It's so lovely and quiet. It's quite sunny. I can see my reflection there. But I'm just here because we know that when we understand how money works in our business, it changes our lives completely and forever. I'm going to put the link to the blog post about the cupcakes. I'm going to put the link to the webinar invite for the 20th of January. And I'll look forward to seeing you next week back here, same time, same healthy numbers, profit. I know, isn't that tree fantastic? Sorry, profit. Healthy Numbers Profit Lab. I just want to show you. It's absolutely stunning, isn't it? It's a carving. I mean, you can see it's 3-dimensional. It's absolutely beautiful. There's so much gorgeous art in this house, and they do tours. I'll put the link because they actually do tours of the house. And Louisa, you're in Sydney, I know, so maybe you would like to come and see the house sometime. It's exquisite. Yeah. Okay, everybody, have a terrific week. Any questions? Let me know, and I'll see you next week.